tissue.
Finally, here at 11, things were not too rough for this very cute parade. Dozens of dogs got all dressed up to parade through the West Florida in the annual Wiener Palooza Dachshund Parade on Sunday. While the parade is centered on dachshunds, dogs of all shapes and sizes joined in on the fun to raise money for
Is that everybody? All right, welcome everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Ethan Cha. I am the House Representative for District 47B. I'm profoundly honored to have been elected by my peers to the Minnesota Asian Pacific Caucus as the chair. Before we start, I would like us to take a moment of silence for those who were affected by the Monterey Park shooting over the weekend. Thank you. And I would like to honor the Dakotas for lending this land to immigrants like ourselves to ensure that the American dream continues to live on in our communities. The MAP Caucus is the Minnesota Asian Pacific Caucus, made up of 7 House legislators and 3 senators. Our vice chair is Senator Susan Pa, who is to my right, who served District 38 and is the vice chair of Capital Investment. Our other senator members are Senator Fong He from District 67, who is the chair of Environment, Climate, and Legacy. And he is also the assistant majority leader in the Senate. We also have Representative Fu Lee from District 59, who is the chair of Bonding. Senator Tu Xiong, District 44, vice chair of Energy, Utilities, Environment, and Climate. We have Representative Gao Li Wang He, who is to my right here, from District 64, who is the chair of the Pension Commission. We have Representative Jay Xiong from District 67B, who is the chair of Workforce Development, Finance, and Policy. And we have Representative Samantha Vang from District 38B, who is the chair of Agriculture, Finance, and Policy. And we have to my left here, Representative Samantha Sensimera from 63A, and also Representative Liz Lee from District 67A, who is also the Vice Chair of Property Tax Division, and also Assistant Majority Leader in the House Caucus. I want to take this opportunity to thank all the voters that made this possible to elect us to represent you. We want to thank all of you. We want to thank our parents for providing us the opportunity for the American dream, for which they fought so hard for. It is not only a privilege, but an honor to be here, all of us, to serve the great state of Minnesota. We are humble in the presence of others who have served before us. As the chair, with my colleagues, I am looking forward to working collaboratively with all my caucuses and colleagues to serve as an active collective voice to meet the needs of all Minnesotans. By viewing policy through the lens of equity and access, we will expand opportunities and participation for our diverse API communities. At this moment, I would like to turn this over to my Vice Chair, Senator Susan Pa.
Thank you, Chair Cha. This legislative session, we will be working on 5 key bills that will impact our AAPI communities. The Stop Hate Bill, Chief Author is Representative Samantha Vang. The English Language Learner Bill, Chief Author is Representative Gao Li He. The Ethnic Studies Bill and the Nonprofit Infrastructure Grants Program, Chief Author is Representative Samantha Sensamira. And the AAPI Veterans Bill, Chief Author is Senator Fong He and myself. Our top 5 bills that we'll be working on this legislative session aims to increase equity and opportunities for our AAPI communities. We're proud to represent our community and to address the needs of our communities and the issues that impacts our community most. Next up, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Representative Liz Lee.
Thank you, Senator Pa. Hello, everyone. My name is Liz Lee. I am the new representative for House District 67A. As you just heard, the Senator went over some of our 5 priority bills for this year, but obviously the AAPI community in Minnesota and across the United States is extremely diverse, and we, have an opinion on almost every other policy issue. And so I am going to talk a little bit more about gun violence as it affects our community and communities of color, because even though we only have these 5 bills that we're pushing for, right, we are going to be advocating for everything else that affects our community. And so want to acknowledge that, last week there was a shooting at one of our St. Paul Parks and Rec centers, right? That's in the community where I went to high school, but also as the Minnesota Asian Pacific Caucus and as one of the largest concentrations of Asian American legislators across the country, we thought it was also important to acknowledge that our Asian American community, is still reeling from the shooting this weekend. We want to acknowledge that and just also share that our community, like other communities of color, has never been a stranger to gun violence, and that's something that we hope to address. I know Senator He has a bunch of bills that she's working to address the increase in gun violence that we've seen across the country. And also I want to close with a little bit of a history lesson, because I am a history buff. One of the first mass shootings in American schools across the country was actually in California, where, many, I think almost 10 Southeast Asian elementary school students were shot during recess by a white supremacist. And so this was 30 years ago when our country was welcoming new immigrants and refugees to the country. And I just want to say, gun violence affects all of our communities, and it's definitely something that our caucus hopes to address going forward, even though we shouldn't have to. And with that, it is my honor to introduce our new representative, Samantha Sensamira, who also made Minnesota history as the first Japanese American elected to the legislature in 2023, which also is way too late, as our community has hosted Japanese Americans since World War II, when we had many Japanese Americans come to Minnesota and be part of a group of code breakers. So with that, Rep. Sensamira.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Samantha Sensamura. I represent District 63A, South Minneapolis. I'm proud to be a member of the MAP caucus. I come to you today with both an extremely heavy heart from the events of this weekend and feeling pride and honor to be sharing the stage and be part of this powerful caucus. I'm going to talk about our 5 priority bills this year, and I'm going to talk in depth about 2 of the bills that I'm proud to carry. The first bill that is incredibly timely, especially at this moment, is the Stop Hate Bill, carried this year by Representative Samantha Vang. This bill is brought forward by a broad coalition of community groups, and it makes clear that Minnesota will not tolerate, thank you, not tolerate hate, harassment, and abuse against a protected group. This extremely timely bill addresses the rise of bias and hate incidents we've seen exacerbated by the pandemic. The second bill, carried by Representative Kyle Lee-Her, is a bill to support our English language learner students. This bill addresses a deep funding need in our public schools to support English language learners. This bill would increase the per pupil funding for EL students from $704 to $1,000, and it would create a new formula with a 4-year phase-in to get completely rid of this cross-subsidy. The third bill is our AAPI Veterans Bill, championed by Senator Fong He and Senator Susan Pa. This bill addresses the mental health and wellness of our AAPI veterans and ensures that they can access important and critical veteran services and benefits. And finally, I'm going to talk about 2 bills that I will be carrying this year. The first is the Ethnic Studies Bill. This bill would make ethnic studies a graduation requirement for all Minnesota students. This bill would ensure that the histories and cultures that are taught in schools and that all students have a chance to see themselves reflected in our curriculum. This bill ensures that all students in Minnesota will be taught honest and accurate versions of U.S. history. And I can say that as a former Minnesota public school student, as an educator, as a mother, and as a 4th-generation Japanese American, I know how it feels to have your history and culture neglected or relegated to the sidelines in school. This bill has been carried and powered through for many years by the Ethnic Studies Coalition and has been really raised up and amplified by students who come to us year after year asking to ensure that they can be reflected in the curriculum. I'm proud to carry this bill, and I'm proud and excited to get it passed this year. Finally, I want to talk about an important bill, our Nonprofit Infrastructure Grant Program. This program was created in 2017 to support small, culturally specific nonprofits who often provide critical services to reach community members. This program was established to help build the internal infrastructure of nonprofits and ensure that they can be competitive for further grants from the state or from the federal government. We saw that during the pandemic, it was small, culturally specific nonprofits that stepped up and were the lifeline for many of our communities that were most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic: the elderly, children, limited English language speakers, and individuals with disabilities. Nonprofits play a critical and pivotal role in fulfilling the gaps that government can often not provide for, and we know that working in community requires time. It requires deep and trusting relationships and creative problem-solving strategies, and oftentimes nonprofits are better able to fill that role than the government. This grant program would help ensure that culturally specific nonprofits grow, thrive, and are strong. We know that in times of crisis, our nonprofits need to be strong and resilient to be able to respond to the daily unpredictable demands of our world, like the mass shooting that we saw this weekend in Monterey Park, like the global pandemic, and the ongoing and pervasive anti-Asian sentiments and violence that we feel in our community. I can say that as a former nonprofit executive director, I know how instrumental this kind of capacity building can be for small grassroots organizations. We are confident that all of our priorities will find great support and success this legislative session. I'm now going to bring back up the chair of our caucus, Representative Eason Cha, who will be available to answer more questions. Thank you.
At this time, the MAP caucus and its members will be open to questions. Thank you. Yes.
Quick question. How did the 2 rookies become the chair and co-chair?
The 2 first-timer became chair because of the grace of the senior Senator Fong He and Representative former Majority Whip Kyle Lee-Her. So it is because of their leadership that you see 2 new legislators up here as the chair. But we're not new to legislation. You know, we've been in this space. You know, We've been doing a lot of community works, and although we are new to legislation, we're not new to serving our community. So thank you.
Yeah, how quickly are you hoping to, get through the anti-hate bill? Is that something that you guys will be prioritizing? Or can you just talk a little bit about that?
Thank you. This is Representative Vang, the chief author of the Stop Hate Bill, and it has been a top priority in the last session, and it remains to be a top priority. I am continuing to working with advocates and also on the Senate side to fast track this bill. And so as of now, we did have our first hearing last week in Public Safety Committee, and then we are still talking about some amendment changes, and then we'll fast track that to the next committee, and we'll try to get it through as soon as possible.
What kind of changes are you looking at?
We're looking at further clarifying on the bill, looking at right now the bill has link appropriations, so trying to put in some numbers in as we talk about grants to nonprofits to build infrastructure on reporting of hate and bias incidents. And so those are some of the things that we are having discussion on.
What about what sort of gun measures are you in support of?
I can speak to that. So I'm actually the chief author of the report, Lost or Stolen Firearms Within 48 Hours, and I'm actually working with Representative Pinto, Moeller, and Becker-Finn on a slate of gun violence prevention bills, which includes safe storage, and some of our marquee bills from previous bienniums, like the red flag laws. We're continuing to work on those, and we think that this is the biennium we're going to get those bills through.
Do you think you have the votes? Are you confident there are those in the Senate this time for all or some of those measures in the Senate caucus?
We are always hopeful because we know that gun violence is not something that is going to go away, and we are seeing more and more incidents. And so the urgency of getting something through, that we are hopeful that our Senate partners will be there with us.
After every mass shooting, there's always this renewed discussion about gun safety measures, certainly in this building as well.
Right.
And the gun rights lobby would always push back with, well, this doesn't stop a mass shooting. California example, California has really stringent rules. So I guess, what would you say to that argument from that side of the gun debate, that these policies are already in place in places like California, where this tragedy just occurred?
Well, and Representative Lee can also add on to this, but I would say that on any issue that we work on, there is no one law that is a panacea. And that there is never any time in which we pass a bill that we think it's going to completely solve a problem. And so what I would say is that at the risk of doing nothing, that's the alternative, right? And so, and when we look at the statistics on when gun violence does happen, most of the times those guns are purchased legally, or somebody is a registered user. So like there's not, that if we think that it's just the illegal guns that are causing problems, there's many ways in which we can approach this issue, but that we do know that if we can put some reasonable measures in place, like safe storage, right, or having certain requirements before someone can own a firearm. Like I went through a firearms training this weekend for myself for a permit to carry, and when I looked at what I had to go through in order to get a permit, it's really minimal. And so, I had to go through a longer training for my hunter safety than I did for to have a personal firearm. And so I think that there's still a lot more we can do to ensure that people who own firearms actually have the information they need to be able to safely use that firearm. Representative Lee, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add that, obviously we are state legislators here and we are trying our best to protect our communities. But this is why we cannot have a patchwork of, gun laws in different states. This is why we actually need federal legislation. But as state legislators, we are going to do our best, right, to protect our communities here. Because as when a state enacts gun safety legislation, the guns that come into the state for the crimes come from all the other surrounding states, right? So this is why it's so important to pass federal legislation. So, there's one set standard.
After the shooter from Monterey was identified as an Asian man over the weekend, there's been some rhetoric on social media about how, at least it wasn't a hate crime. Could somebody just shed some light on how violence is violence regardless, and how it has shaken up the API community?
Sure, I I try not to read the Twitter comments because, as we know, our public discourse on social media channels like Twitter have really gotten away from what used to be more civil discourse, right, in the town square. And we also know that when people are on the internet, that conversation is a little bit removed from the personal. And so, I think as the MAP caucus and as a part of our Posse caucus, we know that, white supremacy is here and it's something that we have to fight. And, this is why Rep. Vang, right, has her anti-hate bill. I think it's unfortunate that there are comments like that, right? But this is why we don't read the Twitter comments. We know that, white supremacy is on the rise, and that's why we have to enact legislation to protect our communities.
And I would just add that when we look at what happens around violence or poverty or education, that there's certain narratives that exist within that, but it is an issue that impacts all of us, and that hate crimes and crimes based in bias is its own issue, along with gun violence prevention, gun violence, and with all of the other ills within our society and how all those things intersect. So when people are looking to break down these issues as, well, at least it's not this thing, yes, but there are 10 other things within these systems that intersect with each other, and there's complexities in that, which is why when we legislate, we can't legislate with one law to as a panacea to fix any type of problem. And I think this further illustrates that particular point.
When the AAPI community to the shooting happening during, there's a lot we don't know, right, about the shooter and the motive, but like at the kickoff of Lunar New Year here, after the pandemic, all of this, how it's rattled maybe, if it's rattled.
Yeah, and I can speak to this a little bit. I'm not from a culture that celebrates Lunar New Year, so maybe afterwards one of my colleagues would come up and talk about that piece of it. What I can say is, I spoke this morning to a prominent leader from an Asian American group, and we were kind of talking about some of the complexities of what we are learning about this case, about who the shooter was, about how they were connected to the community. And I think it's important to just say right now, like, our communities don't have a lot of information, right? We're learning things in real time along with all of you. What I can say and what I spoke with this leader about is, the fact that our communities normally, but I think especially in the years since the pandemic, are living in this kind of state of being on red alert, right? We've experienced the shootings in Atlanta. We've experienced hate crimes and bias here locally. And so when we hear about something like this, I think that our whole community just kind of goes into a heightened state as we learn the details as the story develops. And really that's the state that our community has been living in for the last few years, which I think speaks to the need for really supporting community groups. It speaks to the need for supporting our young people who are in schools. I think it also supports just the need for more mental health support generally for our communities.
Yeah, and I would just add, you're right, it was the beginning of Lunar New Year, which goes on for the rest of the week. But I'd also want to acknowledge and thank the law enforcement folks and first responders there who were also able to hold press conferences in like multiple languages, right? And so that just speaks to the diversity of the community and how, we do need to have diverse law enforcement officers. And, I know that the community there has social workers and then other nonprofits that have stepped up, but that just stresses the importance of funding for some of our multicultural nonprofits here and multilingual nonprofits to react and respond when things like this happen in communities who don't predominantly speak English.
You've been a hunter for a long time. Could you talk, what would your message be to fellow hunters about some of the gun restrictions, like the universal background checks and red flags? What would you say to them if they're worried that's going to restrict their ability to hunt?
Sure, that's a really good question. And I remembered, I think, when I bought my shotgun, which is a while ago, I literally bought it and took it home with me. And I think that for those of us who are law-abiding citizens who are gun owners, that for us to wait extra periods to get our guns or to go through extra checks in order to get our guns, like, I know when deer hunting season in Wisconsin starts. I know when deer hunting season in Minnesota starts. Like, I can plan for those types of things. And so I always tell people that for the safety of our communities, it is okay for us to plan a little bit ahead in order to prepare for how long it may take for some of these, should these new laws go into effect in order for us to access new firearms. And to be honest, I've had my shotgun, my husband bought it for me as an anniversary present, our first year, very romantic. I've had that gun for about 25 years, and so the fact that I haven't had to buy another firearm since then, and so I know that there are some individuals who like a different firearm for each sport that they participate in, and so I understand that that can be difficult, but I also know that, those are the small measures we can put in place to protect our communities.
You said you also just got through the permit to carry classes, courses. Are you now carrying a gun? Are you?
I am not.
Personal safety is at risk, or is this something, did you do it for educational purposes, or?
I think that it is everyone's right to choose to carry or not, and I always feel that as somebody who wants to be a responsible gun owner, that I should actually know the process in going through how to acquire one. And so I really wanted to go through it to understand the process, but also that should I choose to, that I am able to as well. And I think that, I was having this conversation with Chair Cha, because I said to him, I don't know if I'm ready to carry, because it's a big responsibility and it's a big lifestyle change. And so there's so many things that you have to take into consideration. I hope that everybody, even if they're going to carry or not, goes through this training so that they understand what it means, when somebody else is carrying, what they have to go through as well.
Can you talk about the ethnic studies bill a little bit? Are there any events that you're hoping to, mandate that, schools teach, or is there any state that you're modeling your legislation after? Can you just talk about it?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And, I'll say that I'm taking a lot of the lead from the Ethnic Studies Coalition, which has been working on this issue for a number of years. And they have been trying to kind of tackle the issue of making sure that we have a diverse curriculum represented in schools through a few different measures. One of them is through the Ethnic Studies bill, which makes ethnic studies a class and a graduation requirement for all high school students. Additionally, they have been doing a lot of work on our standards. So ensuring that at all grade levels, there is an ethnic studies standard of kind of what kinds of histories should be taught in schools. So that goes much more in depth and goes through kind of certain events or certain groups that need to be captured. We're seeing this piece as kind of giving a little bit more teeth to ensure that those standards are actually taught within our high schools.
Thank you. That will commend the session, and then thank you each and everyone for being here. Thank you.
I don't know if we mentioned this earlier on, but we are probably the second largest AAPI caucus in the country, just outside of Hawaii.
Yeah.
Right. Minnesota, that have such a large AAPI caucus. So that's kind of nice. Okay. I thought that was
Hard to believe for this
Share the legislature.
Number of AAPI legislators. We looked at California, and so these are unofficial numbers, but we did look at California counters, and we actually have
Outside of Hawaii.
And so somebody should double check that for us, but we did an initial check, and it could be, maybe we didn't get everybody, but.
Are we doing it right here?
We're one of the